What's going on, everyone? Bradley Beal's time with the Washington Wizards may be coming to an end. He hasn't opted into his contract, and rumors and speculations are kind of all over the place. One minute, he wants to leave. He's even said himself in interviews, not necessarily that he wants to leave, but he wants to win more than the money. And that means even if it's not with the Washington Wizards, he's willing to go wherever it takes to win an NBA championship. And so Washington's kind of in this weird spot to where they don't really have any great young assets that teams would be, running to the door for to go and try to trade for. And they don't really have talent enough around Bradley Beal for them to be a legit contender. I mean, as constructed, very likely, best case scenario, they're fighting for a play-in. Maybe they, make the playoffs. But realistically, I mean, Bradley Beal is either stuck in Washington for the next 5 years and hope maybe something can come of him, being loyal and committed. But we've seen what happened with Damian Lillard for so long. I think it's very likely that he could leave. And then it comes down to, okay, well, what team could he go to that could give him an opportunity to win? And will Bradley Beal go to a team like the Lakers or something like that to where, you're building this super team? Or would he want to go to a team where he's kind of, a guy? Like maybe not the guy, but he is in the discussion of the guy for the team. And one team that comes to mind immediately is the Toronto Raptors. Now, I did a video yesterday diving into Donovan Mitchell potentially being traded to the Toronto Raptors because the Raptors, they need a consistent go-to scorer. And they need a, primary distributor. They kind of run a lot of offense through Siakam, who's kind of developed into this point forward in many ways. But even he is not very consistent at times. And you saw during the playoffs that they would go on these 5-minute stretches where they wouldn't score a basket. And they have this great setup of all these switchable wings and just length and size and very modern NBA style team. But they also have a lot of the same guys. Scotty Barnes, Siakam, OG Anunoby, all these guys are essentially the same player. And as great as it is to have that, you very likely need to give up one of them because I don't think eventually you're going to reach the point where you're going to have to max out all three. And I don't think those three are enough to go win you an NBA championship. You need that consistent guy that can go and get you 25 to 30 night in and night out. And I think Bradley Beal is that guy for them. He's not the best defender in the world, but you have enough defense. You have enough changeable wings and big men that can step out and guard multiple positions. You can make up for the lack of defense that Bradley Beal brings to the table. And everything else he adds is so hugely beneficial. So very likely that trade would consist of something along the lines of OG Anunoby, who has talked about how he wants to be out, or at least rumors are that he wants to be out. Let me clarify that, whether that's true or not. And it could just be that the Toronto Raptors are throwing his name out there just to see what kind of return you could get. So, an OG, and then you'd have to give up something like a Gary Trent Jr. For a Bradley Beal. I think if you're the Washington Wizards, this makes a ton of sense. You get two young guys that kind of add to the team you already have. You might get more production out of these two than you would with Bradley Beal on that team. And then Bradley Beal, from a Toronto Raptors standpoint, Bradley Beal gets to go to Toronto, and he kind of is the guy. I would still argue, Siakam is probably still the guy, but he can just be Bradley Beal. He doesn't have to do everything that he has to do with the Washington Wizards. He has to defend, he has to score, he has to rebound, he has to facilitate, where if he went to the Toronto Raptors, he can facilitate when need be, but he can just go and be that consistent scorer for the Toronto Raptors, and I think would really put them in contention. Now, your defense likely takes a slight step back, but again, you have enough size and interchangeable wings that you're fine. You don't need to worry about one guy on the court not being a world stop defender, right? You're making up for that offense of productivity that you're losing with a Gary Trent and an OG. But you're getting more consistency is, I think, the biggest thing and the biggest need that the Raptors have currently. Gary Trent, he is a flamethrower, but he's also one of those guys, he's either on or off. He's either going to give you 30 or he's going to give you 9. He doesn't really have that consistent in between. And so I'd love to see the Raptors kind of take that step, take that gamble, and go get a guy in Bradley Beal. He's still young enough to where you'd have him, for the foreseeable future, and he can grow with the team you already have. He's not 33, 34, 35. He's still on the right side of 30, and so you have him interchanged into this young core that you have that is really solid, made the playoffs, and you very likely could be a contender with this team. It also frees up Scotty Barnes more, who was just a complete stud for the Toronto Raptors, Siakam, all of that. You don't have to worry about, you kind of just fill the need, but you're also allowing everyone around you to kind of be the players that they need to be. And I think from a Washington Wizards side, they have enough depth. Again, nobody's fantastic, but they do have good, solid role players. Kuzma's been really solid for the Washington Wizards. You still have some young guys, but beyond that, you're adding 2 more young guys to your young core that you're trying to build and develop. Not just that, but now you don't have the pressure of we need to contend, we need to compete, so let's do whatever it takes. And you make a bad trade or you do something silly, and now you're in a bad situation, to put it nicely, where you'd have these young guys, you'd have OG. OG kind of becomes the number 1 guy for this team. He gets to kind of display his play style more, and kind of gets to be the guy that has that freedom and range that he doesn't have with the Toronto Raptors, because he's the 3rd option now. And you also get a guy in Gary Trent Jr. that is still very young, that you can use, that can play defense, that can knock down shots. It just spreads the floor. It just gives you more depth and stuff. And I really think the Washington Wizards with OG and Gary Trent are probably just as good as they would be with Bradley Beal. I don't think Washington takes a step back or anything. You might maybe even argue that they would take a step forward because everyone else is now going to step up. As we saw when Bradley Beal was injured and he wasn't playing, you had all these guys really step up and be better players than they were or that we previously thought. And now you're adding OG, who's getting you, 15 to 18 a game. I could see him bumping up to, 22 to maybe 25 a game. Gary Trent Jr., he can kind of be himself. I just think Washington would really benefit from this trade in that regard. And then moving on to the Toronto Raptors, like I said, they still have plenty of depth. They still have plenty of guys and just the structure of the team. They got a great coach. You got a great GM that now goes and gets a guy like Bradley Beal to kind of just put you in a position to truly contend. Because I still don't think even next year they're a contender. But with Bradley Beal, you can make the argument. I think a lot of teams are going to improve. A lot of teams are really going to get better. And I think at some point the Raptors need to make a move to try to really give them the best shot, the best opportunity. I think the Toronto Raptors, again, are extremely good, extremely solid, but they don't have that consistent go-to scorer. And I think you need that guy. You need the guy that can close out games for you, that can knock down big shots, that can consistently night in and night out go get you 30. Because the problem is that if Siakam isn't putting up 25 to 30 that game, you're kind of in trouble unless you have, 5 or 6 guys that are all contributing, 10, something like that. But one of the biggest reasons that they got just smacked in the playoffs, and everyone thought it was going to be a lot more competitive. Like even me, I thought the Raptors were really going to be a tough out. And they weren't really. I mean, yeah, they kind of had that. The series was over when they went down 3-1, but they had that nice little run. It was looking like, oh, maybe they can make things interesting, and then ultimately they didn't. And that was a problem. It was because they couldn't score. You had these stretches where they couldn't put the ball in the hoop. As many wings as they have and as many interchangeable parts as they have, they don't have that guy that you can guarantee is going to get you, 25 a night. And just think of the pressure that Bradley Beal would take off of all the other guys. Scotty Barnes, Siakam, neither of them would have to feel like I have to go get 30 tonight. You have that guy that can do it. He's been the number 1 guy. He's been the star. He's been an all-star. He's been everything you need. I just think if you're the Toronto Raptors, you do whatever it takes. I just think that at this point, yes, Bradley Beal may re-sign. He may, opt out and then sign that 5-year extension, which I don't really understand why you would do that, because you could just opt in and still sign the extension, and then you'd get, that extra $36 million or whatever it is. I don't know why you'd leave that money on the table when Washington isn't going to not offer you that 5-year max. So why wouldn't you opt in, stay there for a year, and then sign the max, and you're not missing out on that money? I understand you're getting the longevity and stuff, but still, Washington's going to give it to you no matter what. That's why I don't really buy, the more recent reports where they're like, oh, he might opt out and then sign the 5-year max. It's like, why? When he could opt in and still do that. he's just gonna leave a $30+ million contract on the table just so he can sign the 5-year extension when he would get that regardless. And the opt-in date is right around the corner. You're talking June 29th. So we're only at this point 2 days away. So we're right there. I just think Bradley Beal's very likely on his way out. If not this year, then very likely next year. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what develops. But as always, this is a discussion, so I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. What do you think about this trade? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Would you like to see Bradley Beal go to the Toronto Raptors? The thing is, though, too, is that, like, as much as Toronto looks nice on paper, I don't think this team is a contender. Beyond that, Toronto's not a destination for players. So the only way Toronto's going to get that star outside of, draft and development is to go and do what you have to do to acquire a player like that via trade. And the last time they made a big move like this, they won an NBA championship. So, why wouldn't you go and try to get, a top guy in the league and try to see if you can win a championship in the next year or two? I just think Bradley Beal expedites the Toronto Raptors so much faster than currently constructed. And I just think at some point you got to take that swing because you have 3 guys that are essentially the exact same player. They're all going to want to be paid. They're all going to want to, eventually feel like they're the better ones. I could just see a lot of disaster down the road. But again, love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section. That being said, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things sports. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.